Support for WUWM podcasts comes from Potawatomi Casino Hotel Milwaukee, home to 24/7 excitement, dining, and an on-site hotel at 1721 West Canal Street. More information at potawatomi.com.
From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Joy Powers. Today, we'll learn about the types of services people in Milwaukee are seeking and the future of the organizations that give that support.
I think we're certain that 2026 will be harder than 2025, and we're even hearing that 2027 is going to be worse than 2026.
Then we'll meet a Wisconsin man who's living off only foraged food for a year.
Historically, there wasn't a word foraging, it was just called eating. It's what human beings have always done. But what I call foraging today is harvesting the food and medicine that the earth is freely and abundantly providing.
Plus, we'll take a few stressful holiday movie situations and give you real-life advice on how to handle them this holiday season. All of that is coming up on Lake Effect. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Joy Powers, and thank you so much for joining us. Impact 211 is a free confidential hotline that people can call for basic needs in southeastern Wisconsin. In addition to helping with food and housing support, the call data provides a snapshot of the region's social safety net. John Hyatt leads the organization, and Bob Waite handles data collection. The two say that the word of the year in 2025 has been uncertainty, as calls for basic needs have jumped over 100% in some areas. And organizations that provide resources for these needs face uncertain financial futures. Lake Effect's Sam Woods is joined by Hyatt and Waite to discuss what they've seen in 2025 and what they expect in 2026.
Take a step back and give a brief synopsis of what Impact is and does. So say I was affected by the flood in August and I need help finding either new clothes or some emergency food, maybe looking for temporary housing. How does Impact help me?
Yeah, so the general theme that runs throughout the organization, we help people talk through their situation or their problem. We consult, we assess, we screen, and so when someone calls, tell us a little bit about what's happening, what have you tried, what are you looking for, and we really trying to find that exact match. So we have thousands of different programs and organizations and services there so that our 211 community resource specialists can look through all of those different resources, whether it's food, whether it's utility payment, health, insurance, anything that somebody might be needing assistance with, and be able to find the right resource and then share that with you and talk about, does this seem like we're getting at what you need? And so when we find that match, then we can share that resource with you. We also go one step further and say, tell us a little bit more about what else is happening. So somebody might say, I lost my job, I have a health bill that I had to pay, and so now we can look for other ways to get kind of at that root cause of that too. So how can we help with resources that might get you back to work, might provide some temporary transportation, all of those kinds of things, because we know food is one thing, there may be other things being impacted too. So we really have that be a kind of a whole person kind of call when somebody calls in looking for help.
So, John, you've been with Impact for a while in a number of different roles, but big picture, as your role as the lead of the organization, if you could describe 2025 in a word, what would that word be?
Yeah, it's the word that a lot of people are using. It's uncertainty, and kind of at every level, at a local level, with local government and funding, with foundations and funding, at a federal level with funding. And so that's the level that I'm working on. When I mentioned before, make sure enough money's coming in so that we can keep doing our work. That's the uncertain part of it. And I used to say that that was a year-to-year proposition. And more recently, it's become month-to-month. And so we're finding out that something we thought a funding source would continue through the end of the year all of a sudden won't continue through the end of the year, or it will continue, but it's at 50% of what it had been. And so there's that uncertainty. And our work depends on relationships with a lot of other organizations who are also trying to work their way through all of that uncertainty. And so, in COVID, when we said we're all in this together, it's feeling like we're all in it together again. And at the community-based organization level, we're sort of the bottom rung of the ladder, and funding and information flow down to us. And so by the time it gets to us, you're all of a sudden in react mode without being able to be as thoughtful and thinking through things. So it's causing us to make adjustments on the fly, which is not impossible. We're used to doing that, but these are things where you're going from a certain level of staffing to be able to serve callers and people in need of help, and all of a sudden you don't have as many folks as you used to. So how do we navigate that?
Well, how do you navigate that? When it comes to uncertainty in funding for an organization like Impact, how does that affect your ability to do your work when you're wondering, if the grant we have right now, we're actually going to be able to finish it out?
So we are very efficient in the work that we do. And since even before I started, it was always, how do we do this more effectively, but how can we do it more efficiently? And so when I talk about online searches and apps and text messaging, there's a way to do that that's more cost effective. It can be just as efficient and effective as calling and talking to somebody, but trying to have things available. Of course, if somebody's using the app, then they don't have to be calling us. And so it's just a way to shift our financial resources so that we can provide as much assistance to people as possible. It's more expensive, obviously, to staff 24/7, 365. And if we can get people using those other opportunities for finding resources on their own, it's one way of spreading that around. It also forces us to think about and try to make predictions on what next month and what next year will look like. You're familiar with our coordinated entry program, and we'd been central in that for Milwaukee County for the last 13 years, really since it started. And as funding shifted there, and as we tried to raise funds but just couldn't raise enough funds, and the funding from government and other sources started to dry up or go away or never really allowed us to make ends meet, we have to make difficult decisions about programs and programming. And so we decided that at the end of this year would be our last in coordinated entry. And I'm going to be handing that off to another organization in the community to carry that forward in 2026.
Let's get into what we're seeing this year on the phone. So, Bob, I want to ask you as Impact's data guy, what have you seen this year? Are there any notable jumps in calls for particular services or jumps in calls in particular geographic areas? Anything that stands out in the call data we've received this year?
Sure. What we've seen, especially since the flooding event in August, is some really drastic changes in the types of resources people are looking for. And I guess it wouldn't be too surprising that basic needs resources contacts have risen. And in some zip codes, in fact, it's gone up by 50 to 60% in Milwaukee County. That's very unusual to see that kind of an increase in such a short period of time. And overall, throughout southeastern Wisconsin, food resource requests have gone up nearly 60%. And that includes, in Kenosha County, for instance, a 123% increase. In Racine County, an increase of 63%. In Washington County, over 100% increase in requests for food resources. And some of this could be attributed to not only the after effects of the flooding event, but also the uncertainty that's been taking place for those households that are somewhat reliant on the food share program to meet their food needs. And as I think you know, there was a period of time in November where the food share benefit was not provided to those individuals. And during that period, people did get scared, and they probably needed some assurance that they could have food in their home. So They were calling us. They were accessing emergency food resources in the communities where they live, and that contributed to that increase as well. The other thing that we've seen in Milwaukee County in particular since the flooding event is an increase in the number of people looking for clothing and personal and household goods. Just in that period, it's gone up 14%. It doesn't seem like a huge jump, but it's a little bit different than food, where people may call us every single week for a food referral. But to see that kind of a jump in such a short period of time for a real specific type of need that may not necessarily be very common is kind of unusual. So that's what we've seen so far. What we're going to be looking at really into the future is continuing with that uncertainty. And another thing that's been going on, as you all well know, is that it got really cold really early this year. And what that's going to mean is that people are already, working paycheck to paycheck or barely making ends meet are now going to be faced with higher utility bills. So how does that affect a household? That might mean that they are wanting to keep up with their utility bills so they don't have a huge bill to pay in the spring, but that might mean they're going to cut back on buying new clothing. That means they may use their disposable income to pay the utility bill or to pay for other things, meaning they may need to access emergency food resources in the community again. How does that affect children? If they're living in an environment where there is stress, how does that affect their ability to do well in school or to feel okay when they're at school but they're worried about what's going on at home? I think it's very natural and normal to think that's going to impact their thoughts during the daytime. So there is a domino effect with all these things going on, and some of these things don't get resolved overnight. So those are the concerns that we're kind of paying attention to in our communities, and what does that mean in 2026 with continued uncertainty and not really being sure if all those safety net services are going to be adequate to take care of themselves.
So you're listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Sam Wood speaking with Bob Waite and John Hyatt of Impact 211. And Bob, you were just speaking about data on calls you've received, and you mentioned that basic needs resources have jumped 50 to 60% in some zip codes in Milwaukee. Food requests up over 100%. People worried about being able to pay utility bills, as well as a kind of domino effect of all of these things happening at once. How have you seen this kind of just seems like uncertainty in the air affect organizations that you refer people to for services when you get a call from someone saying, I need XYZ service?
One thing that we do in the background is maintain information on the agencies and organizations that provide services in the community. It's very important to know that we have 4 people that their full-time job is just to maintain all of that information. We maintain information on food pantries and a lot of these basic needs services almost on a daily or even weekly basis. It's important for us to know, because we built up such a good relationship with many organizations, that they let us know when there's a change. And we're able to make that adjustment in our database right away, so that we're not giving a referral to somebody where they're not going to get help. And that's a very important part of what we do besides the call taking and everything else. And we're starting to hear that from organizations. And food pantries, for instance, may run out of food a little bit earlier in the week or the day, and they let us know, hey, please don't send any more referrals to us. So it's beyond really taking calls, but it's also the relationships that we've built up with organizations in the community. But it is happening. It's that sort of condition may increase, and we're particularly concerned about the cuts to housing resources. HUD has made some pretty drastic changes in how they're distributing money for certain programs related to homelessness, and that's going to have an impact on a lot of different services in the community, especially as it relates to healthcare and behavioral health, but also all those basic needs things. So there's a lot going on that really hasn't hit the road yet, but it's something that we're concerned about and certainly paying very close attention to.
When we can see what we think is going to be happening in 2026 and having a lot of those conversations with our community partners, and it is this uncertainty, and it's like, if this really happens the way that we're thinking it's going to, how are we going to manage to keep these services viable and open and available with just fewer people to try and help folks that need it? And so it's at an organization level, not having enough resources, but then just not having enough of those resources available for people to access in the community as well.
Tell me more about what you're expecting from 2026. Given that uncertainty was the word of 2025, is there anything we can be certain about in 2026?
I think we're certain that 2026 will be harder than 2025, and we're even hearing that 2027 is going to be worse than 2026. And that's at local government level and also at federal level. So we know that Milwaukee County, if you've paid attention to their budgeting, the transit system is in dire financial shape. The behavioral health services had a $12 million deficit in 2026 that they're having to sort of manage for. And so when you're talking about across all of those, that entire county, Milwaukee County budget, those cuts and those reductions have to come from somewhere. And while they try to be thoughtful about how they do that, you're still talking about millions and millions of dollars that have to come somewhere. So we know where some of the hundreds of thousands are coming from impact, and we know that they're coming from other organizations in the community as well. So we're sort of bracing and trying to prepare for how do we adjust or adapt. I talked before about trying to use technology as one way to find some efficiency and those kinds of things. So, and then a lot of planning and strategizing, and everybody says we got to go out and raise more dollars. Well, I mean, we're always trying to raise more dollars, and everybody's trying to raise more dollars, and there's a limited number of foundations and philanthropy that's available out there too. So, I mean, at some point, the reality is there will be fewer resources, fewer organizations, and it will be harder for people to sort of get along in their day-to-day living.
How does this moment compare to other years in recent memory? Are these challenges new?
I think they are. I think what's different was that when we had things in the past, they were sort of transitional. You would know that they were time limited. We were going to get through a pandemic. We were going to get through financial crisis, those kinds of things. And these feel like shifts at that federal level that are here to stay for at least a while. And so the cuts and the reductions and the shifts are so deep and so drastic that you're trying to think, how can we make our way through this without losing a lot of organizations and a lot of people along the way, and hope that we can make it through. And, I don't want things to get so bad that somebody has to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe this isn't working. So I saw information today that there might be some subsidies for farmers on the horizon as a part of a reaction to tariffs and what that has meant for farmers. And so, maybe if it gets to that point with farmers, maybe it'll get to some of this with housing and some of that kind of stuff where they will start to rethink and put some things back in place. So I know that hope isn't a strategy, but we're hopeful that some things can get better.
And I would say the one big shift that we experienced was during the economic downturn that started in 2007 and stretched into 2009, early 2010. And we did see a huge increase in the number of calls because more people were out of work and everything, associated with just needing more resources. But at that time, the philanthropic community stepped in and was able to help organizations because there was increased need. And the community was able to respond because there was a built-in set of resources available to help people out, to help those organizations out. It's not like that now. And like John is saying, we're experiencing some cutbacks in funding, but everybody is, and everybody's approaching the foundations for the same reason we are. This is very different from that scenario, and I think John is accurate in saying, this is very, very different, very unique than we've had in our experience of doing this kind of work.
Well, John, Bob, thank you for joining me on Lake Effect.
Thanks for having
Thank you.
us.
Appreciate it.
John Hyatt is the president and CEO at Impact, and Bob Waite is the senior account manager. They spoke with Lake Effect Sam Woods. You can hear the full interview at WUWM.com. And did you know you can listen to Lake Effect as a podcast? Search for Lake Effect wherever you get your podcasts to download and listen on demand. In about 15 minutes, we'll take a few stressful holiday movie situations and give you real-life advice on how to handle them this holiday season. But first, we'll meet a Wisconsin man who's only eating food he forages for an entire year. That's coming up on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. You're listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. A Wisconsin man is living for an entire year solely on food he forages. It's something he hopes will inspire others to think about how their day-to-day practices impact our world. Robin Greenfield visited Milwaukee recently to talk about his foraging journey. That's when he joined WUWM environmental reporter Susan Bentz.
When I was younger, wanted to either be a marine biologist, a professional fisherman, or a banker. As much as I loved the earth, I also loved money.
A banker?
Yes. And so when I was in university, I was studying aquatic science and biology, but I got into sales. I started to sell books door to door, and I learned that I could make a lot of money and be very successful. And so I set aside the desire to work in the outdoors and be a biologist, and instead make a whole bunch of money in a short period of time and then be able to be exploring and living a close connection with the earth during a different time. So I really ended up on a path of money to a large degree from my younger years.
What was the turning point?
Well, in university in our biology, we learned about how the world works, but we didn't learn about how humans are a part of it all. And so there was a great separation and a great disconnection for me. And in 2011, I was in San Diego running a marketing company, and I learned that the way that I was living was causing real destruction, and that I was part of systems of exploitation and oppression of people, of the plants and animals. And the food I was eating, the car I was driving, the stuff I was buying, the trash I was creating. And I decided to, one step at a time, radically transform my life to try to live in harmony with the earth or live sustainably.
No easy feat.
No, it turns out that to live sustainably in this consumer-dominated society is a very radical act. And the further you take it and the more you try to break free from our societal norms and structures requires a deep, deep level of radical being, really.
Let's talk a little bit more about the foraging element of it all. What is foraging?
Historically, there wasn't a word foraging, it was just called eating. It's what human beings have always done. But what I call foraging today is harvesting the food and medicine that the earth is freely and abundantly providing, not through the domestication of human hands. Now, once you get into it, you start to see, wow, things are far more complex. Humans have had deep impacts in relationship with plants and animals for thousands of years. But to put it simply, it's harvesting the plants and the mushrooms, and I also do hunt a little bit of that's
and
just
fish,
growing. And
right?
Fish, yes, and fish. And that's that Wisconsin, the land, the water here is just bubbling up from the earth without us planting it and placing it.
How did you learn about foraging? Were you doing a certain amount over these many years?
At first, foraging was just a concept. I dabbled, I heard a little bit here and there, but when I really decided to dive in, I was actually immersed in a year of growing and foraging all my food in Florida in 2018. So that forced me to learn a lot. I went to local foraging classes, I got a few books, I watched different channels on YouTube, went to different websites. And so basically just took in the information from, all the different resources out there. And I quickly learned I don't have to figure anything out. All the knowledge that we need is already there from really, really great resources.
So you're in the beginning stage of a year-long experiment of living only on foraged food and medicines?
Yeah, exactly.
Give me a day in the life of you as a forager. Are you thinking of not only what you're eating that day, but what you want to store and preserve?
Yeah, so today's day 61 of the year. I'm just 2 months in, and I'm talking about foraging all of my food and medicine. Of course, the calories, the fat, the protein, the vitamins, the salt, down to every single morsel. So yes, this requires a deep level of planning, because if I don't have the food, then that's the risk of me, failing at this experiment and having to give up. So although some people that might just imagine me out there enjoyably plucking leaves off the tree and harvesting this and that, I keep a deep journal of what I need to harvest, how much. So for example, wild rice, a day in the life of wild rice season is harvesting from morning until sunset, and then there's processing. And so some days I'm out foraging all day, some days I'm processing and storing the food, and then other days I get to just enjoy the food and eat it. Right now, being December, I'm not doing a lot of foraging, but I am continuing to eat what I harvested in the 3 months of preparation that I gave myself from July to October, and then what I've harvested over the last 2 months.
So you're sustaining yourself or yourself and others in this process?
I would hope to be sustaining others in the sense that I might not be providing them with food directly, but I'm providing them with the knowledge to harvest their food. It would be really hard for me to forage enough food to feed millions, but I really believe that millions more people through this knowledge can reconnect with the plants and learn to forage more of their food. So a form of sustenance.
Thus far, what's one of the interesting things that you've learned or experienced?
Being that I don't have a domesticated garden, I have to learn how to meet all of my desires and needs from the earth. And so that includes all the flavors. And so I've been amazed at the number of plants that exist out there that I didn't know were edible, like Virginia creeper or five-leafed ivy. You can eat those shoots in the spring, or burdock. You can actually eat the burdock shoots in the spring as well, in the early summer. There's so much more food than I even knew. It's incredible. Like I said, I'm 2 months in, and I've lost about 5 pounds, but what do you expect when you give up the Ben & Jerry's ice cream? You're going to lose a few pounds. But at this point, I knew theoretically, but I'm feeling deep inside of myself and in my cellular being that the earth can provide me with everything I need. And that's the experiment. Can the earth provide me with all I need without bringing in, industrialization and, a lot of destructive systems?
Yeah. You mentioned burdock. Does that also have medicinal qualities?
Yes. Burdock, I harvest the roots and I roast those, and I make a roasted root blend. You can do that with chicory and dandelion as well. And then you can also harvest the roots to eat them as well. So does it have medicinal qualities? Absolutely. But every plant has medicinal qualities. Every food that I'm eating is a medicine. And it's all preventative health care. When we're filling our body with foods from the earth rather than processed foods, it's all, in my opinion, a medicine. And we don't need to be instead taking in a whole bunch of medicines, because our food is our medicine and our relationship with the earth is a medicine. So in many ways you could say I've gone, back to a previous time. But this is a new way of doing the previous time in a modern time, and, balancing the two of them.
Is there a mistake you've learned from?
Yes. I've made a few mistakes. This year I harvested ginkgo, which a lot of people know for its smelly fruit. And that's not a problem. I can deal with the smell. But I was processing a whole bunch of it to get the nuts out. They're great nuts. They eat them in Japan. And I had it all over my arms, the fruit. And then I decided, I'm going to look up this fruit again. I need to refresh myself. And sure enough, it has the same component as poison ivy, the same oil that causes that dermatitis or that rash. And I ended up really itchy for a week all over. And so that was a real struggle for a little bit. That was a mistake.
If someone is considering or just stepping into the idea of foraging, are there any do's and don'ts that come to mind first?
Yeah, so the number one rule of foraging is only eat something if you are 100% sure that you have the correct identification and how to eat the plant. The good news is there are so many easy to identify plants out there. You don't need to learn all the toxic plants. There's, I would say, at least 100 plants growing in Wisconsin that have no toxic look-alike that are very easy to identify. So my encouragement is to start with just one plant at a time, learn one plant, learn how to harvest it and cook it and incorporate that into your diet. And if you're really excited about it, learn one plant a month for a year. That's 12 plants. That's pretty big. And if you're really excited about it, one plant a week for a year. That's 52 plants. You are now officially the Harry Potter of your community. You have ascended the Muggle status. Even 12 plants and you're already ascending the Muggle status. And that doesn't take too much work to learn 12 plants.
Here you are in an urban setting. Would your advice be the same?
Every large city across the Midwest, every large city in this entire country I've ever visited, and I would say most large cities even in the world, have a substantial amount of food to forage. It's, like here we have basswood trees that are grown as a common landscaping tree. All the leaves are edible. It's a wonderful food. The flowers, you can make a nice relaxing tea from. The seeds, you can actually harvest those and make a chocolate-like flavor. Mulberry, that's a scrap tree growing all over. The leaves, the berries, all edible. So yeah, absolutely. I think actually I'll say that the cities are one of the best places to forage because it is where humans interact with the land that you have the most human food. And we don't know that as individuals today, but that is the product of humans existing in relationship to food for thousands of years, and these being the plants that are a part of our life.
So how do you see your effort, your experimentations, and the information that you share with people through your books and your talks? How do you see that factoring into our future?
My job is just to take responsibility for my own actions. I can't control anything outside of myself. And so my job is to lead by example and show them another way as possible. And with that, light fires inside of people. I don't know what those fires are going to turn into. For some, it might be foraging. For some, it might be, that they are a teacher and they're going to incorporate this into their classrooms. Maybe a lawyer decides to be a lawyer for the earth rather than a lawyer for corporations trying to destroy the earth. So my job is just to light little fires of inspiration and motivation inside of people with deep knowledge, connect them to the resources in their communities that can help them to work together as a community, and see where it goes. The future right now is very, very uncertain. We don't know what it's going to be like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years. But for me, it's very clear that life matters. I value life very greatly, and I'm sure everybody listening to this does. So the question is, what can we do to enrich the life around us while taking responsibility for our actions to make sure we are not destroying the ability for others, including the plants and animals, to have enriched lives?
Robin Greenfield is a Wisconsin native who is living for a full year on food he forages. He spoke with WUWM environmental reporter Susan Benz. Coming up, we'll look at some holiday movies that can teach us lessons about how to handle stressful situations around the holidays. That's next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. This is Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. The holiday season can be full of cheer, but it can also bring unnecessary stress. Whether it's the pressure to get the perfect gift, last-minute changes of plans, or dysfunctional family dynamics, the holidays aren't always easy to navigate. Many holiday movies reflect these sources of December stress and offer insight on how to and how not to navigate them. Dr. Lynn Knobloch-Fetters is a licensed clinical psychologist and an associate professor at Marquette University. She's also a movie buff. She joins Lake Effect's Sam Woods to offer tips on how to manage common causes of holiday stress using situations from holiday movies.
Our first movie is an absolute classic, Home Alone. So for those who aren't familiar, Kevin, the main character played by Macaulay Culkin, is left home alone by mistake as the rest of his family rushes to catch a flight during the holidays.
How could we do this? We forgot him.
We didn't forget him, we just miscounted.
What kind of mother am I?
If it makes you feel any better, I forgot my reading classes.
Now, during the holiday season, there's so much to do with so little time that we tend to forget to focus on the important things. Maybe not, leaving our children behind as we go on vacation kind of important things, but those little things kind of get in the way of realizing and focusing on the important things during the season. Dr. Knobloch-Fetters, can you talk about how to manage the overwhelming feeling of just so much to do, so little time during the holidays?
Yes, I think it's important to keep in mind why we're celebrating the holidays. We're celebrating them to bring our family and friends together, to spread peace and love and joy in the holiday season. And sometimes those minute details can just take over our lives and give us this frustration, this irritation, this overwhelming sense of being overcome by things that are really small when you take a step back. And so I would like to encourage people to take a pause and focus on the things that are most important to them during the holiday season. Special times or experiences that you want to lead the way in your holiday celebration. And when you can focus on those really important moments, the rest of the smaller details seem to fade in importance.
Do you have any tips for someone who, can recognize this, that like, hey, I've got a lot to do in a little bit of time and it's stressing me out, but I want to focus on the more important things, but I just don't feel like I can? Is there any way that someone in that position can kind of work through that?
Our human tendency is just to rush even faster and do even more. But when I work with people, I let them know that if they slow down and really take care of themselves and give themselves some calming time, even take some deep breaths, go for a walk, have some peaceful time, actually, they're better able to manage the stress and they will end up being more productive and feel more fulfilled in the end. So it's kind of this dialectic where we want to rush and get things done, and yet that is the opposite of what will help us feel like we have accomplished things that we are proud of.
In a rush to get things done is a good segue into our next film, which is Jingle All the Way. So this is another 90s film, focuses on the main character, Howard, who's a workaholic husband, and he wants to make up for neglecting his family in lieu of work for, the whole year. And he knows his son wants the hot new toy, a Turbo Man. And Howard, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, goes to extreme lengths to get the perfect gift.
Hey, everybody! These two are looking for a Turbo Man!
Shut up, man! Now, what's so funny? Where have you guys been? Turbo Man's only the hottest selling Christmas toy ever!
And so, like Howard here, he's under a lot of pressure, or he feels like he's under a lot of pressure to get the perfect gift. And so for those who celebrate Christmas and give gifts during Christmas, this is a relatable struggle. There's someone special in your life, and maybe you've told them they're special, maybe you've spent a lot of time with them over the year, but you still want to get them that perfect gift. Do you have any tips for managing this pressure of getting that perfect gift?
I love that you brought up this movie, Jingle All the Way, because I think it's a perfect illustration of focusing on the meaning behind gift giving. So Howard is so focused on buying this special toy for his son, but meanwhile, his family and his son just want more time with him and for him to show up in the memorable experiences that they want him to be a part of. And so I would encourage people to just switch their priorities from trying to think that the perfect gift is going to be the symbol of your love in the relationship to really thinking about expressing your love and joy and appreciation, maybe through spending more time together, having more experiences together, and less about the actual thing. Because we all know that human beings love things for about 10 minutes, and then our attention quickly turns to the next thing. And really, material things aren't as satisfying as deeper, more lasting human relationships and experiences.
I'm picking up on a theme here in the first two answers, that it's not about the commercial part or the material part. It's really like this is an opportunity to spend time with your loved ones, and so kind of focus on that. Am I reading this right?
Yes, you are completely right. Our society really emphasizes commercialism, and it emphasizes busyness and productivity. And during the holiday season, it's very important to try to challenge some of those societal pressures and think about the hidden or the deeper meaning, I should say, of the whole holiday season.
Well, and spending more time together hits on a theme of our next movie, Almost Christmas. So Walter, played by Danny Glover, lost his wife earlier in the year and just wants one thing for Christmas: for his 4 grown children to get along together under the same roof for 5 days during the holidays. And it's what their mother would have wanted, but it proves to be a lot harder than expected.
Oh my God, you always start.
Actually, you both started it.
You know what? You stay out of it. You're just making it worse.
I'm lying now. This is exactly why I want to stay in a hotel, Pop.
Well, what's stopping you now, huh?
Nothing's stopping me. You know, I'm not gonna let you dysfunction.
Quiet. Quiet.
And so navigating family conflict or dysfunction during the holidays is a common form of holiday stress. And often a lot of it feels out of the control of the person who's feeling those feelings, feeling those emotions, feeling that stress. Dr. Knobloch-Fetters, how can people recognize that they're getting stressed out by situations like this and continue to either move from it or know that it's time to remove themselves from the situation?
Oftentimes, when we go back home to spend the holidays with our families, it's almost like we become 10 years old again. And we're relating to our siblings, we're relating to our parents or grandparents in that same way as when we were kids. And those family patterns are so deeply ingrained in us that it's very easy to fall into those patterns without recognizing that you are now with more life experience, more wisdom, and more freedom to relate to your family in different ways than you were when you were 10 years old. So I would encourage people to think about common stress points or stress in relationships, and we all have family members that are difficult to get along with, but think about how would you like to treat them in a loving and gentle way, and how will you rise above the common triggers and not let them pull you under into the feeling of being 10 years old again. So if you can come up with an attitude of charity or generosity or tolerance, I think that will make your holiday experience with your family go much more smoothly.
I love that analogy of feeling like you're 10 years old again, because I feel that it's like kind of a new brain switches on where there's these old things that come up, these old triggers that come up. It's like, man, I haven't thought about this in years. Like, I didn't know this was still a part of me, and they've come up during the holidays or just kind of in certain situations. But Almost Christmas also hits on themes of grief, just like the next movie on our list, Christmas Checklist. And this is the newest movie on our list, and like Almost Christmas, it touches on themes of holiday grieving, but with a lot fewer siblings to fight with. The story centers on Emily, who plans to spend Christmas alone as she grieves her recently passed mother. However, when she discovers a posthumous gift from her mom, a 12 Days of Christmas checklist of self-healing holiday activities, she takes on the challenge to get out of the house for the holidays.
I think she knew I'd be heartbroken without her, so the list is her way of making me do stuff to distract me from my sadness.
Well, then there's only one thing to do. Complete every item on that list.
Grief and loss can be such a huge weight to carry during the holidays, especially recent grief and loss. You know, if this is your first holiday season without, a family member that you really loved or someone in your life that you really loved, that can be a lot to hold on to and fight through to get to that holiday cheer part of the season. But Dr. Knobloch Fetters, for people who are navigating grief and loss during this time, what would you suggest thinking about or focusing on during this time to both acknowledge that grief and that loss and those real feelings, but also maybe find a little bit in the holiday season beyond that?
I think dealing with grief and loss is incredibly challenging at any time of the year, but it's particularly difficult during the holiday season when our image of Christmases past and celebrations with loved ones who are no longer with us can really tug at your heartstrings. And sometimes that grief comes in waves, in floods that you never even expected. And so I encourage people to really find a way to honor that grief during the holiday season. Think about a tradition or a memory that you have with your loved one and do something to honor that memory. And it may not be the same tradition without that person present, but it could be your time of celebration of the relationship that you had and the person that was in your life that impacted you for the good. So I would encourage people not to rush through those feelings or pretend that they aren't there or go on like everything is okay on the outside. I would encourage them to really honor and respect their grief and be attuned with themselves and allow them to feel their feelings in a very respectful and authentic way.
And we'll end on a lighter note with our final movie, A Christmas Story. And so fans of this movie may remember classic lines like, you'll shoot your eye out, kid. But I want to focus on the final scenes where the neighbors' dogs eat the Christmas dinner, and it forces the family to change their holiday plans day of. Unlike some of these bigger emotions that we were just talking about, family dysfunction, grief and loss, regret, something like this can come just out of nowhere, whether it be, your flight was canceled or the neighbor's dogs eat the turkey or, you burn some food, whatever it is. Plans can change even during the holidays, which can also add to that holiday stress, right? So as we're heading into the holidays and as things will inevitably not go as planned, how can people manage that stress of last minute changes day of during the holidays?
I think that sometimes we build up so many idealized fantasies in our mind about the way things should be or how things must be that we don't get fully invested in the moment. And I promise you that if the food is burned or dogs come in and take your Christmas dinner away, you will remember that for the rest of your life. And you might not remember that as much as if the meal was perfect and all went according to plan. And so those kind of comic things that are surprising or changing at the last minute might be the very things that bring your family together and allow you to laugh and reminisce in the future about how difficult that was in the moment, but how everyone got past it. And so I would encourage people to, yes, you can certainly think about your vision for how you'd like the holidays to go, but when that vision doesn't match reality, be flexible enough to go in the present moment and enjoy the experience for whatever it turns out to be.
Well, Dr. Knobloch-Fetters, thank you so much for joining me on Lake Effect and for, putting it back in my brain that this holiday season is supposed to be about time spent together with loved ones, not about gifts, not about things going perfectly, but that time together recharging from a year in community with people. And thank you for reminding us of that as we head into the holidays.
Thank you for having me. I wish everyone a blessed and joyful holiday season.
Dr. Lynn Knobloch-Fetters is a licensed clinical psychologist and an associate professor at Marquette University. She spoke with Lake Effect Sam Woods in 2023. And that wraps up today's show. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Joy Powers. If you missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at wuwm.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Tomorrow on Lake Effect, we'll bring you some of the best stories from the week. Thanks so much for joining us right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.